to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Brittany Spencer Grant, the athletic, and I didn't ask her, the athletic director at Oregon High School Panthers in Wisconsin, correct?
Yeah.
All right, there we go.
Yep.
Welcome to the podcast, Brittany.
Thanks for having me.
Let's have you start by sharing with our audience across the world where you grew up, where you went to school, your first job, etc.
Okay. Well, like you said, my name is Brittany Spencer Grant. I grew up in Verona, Wisconsin, where I'm actually still residing today. So born and raised in Verona. I attended UW-Madison for my undergrad as a kinesiology major. And I was actually a December grad from UW-Madison. So I spent that first semester serving as a substitute teacher kind of around the greater Madison area. And I was super fortunate that first summer out of college to land my first teaching job in New Glarus, which is about 25-ish minutes, just kind of south of Madison. And I taught there for actually 12 years, with the last 9 of those serving in the role of athletic director simultaneously. So it was a school of about 300 students. So I kind of had that dual role of teacher / AD and got to kind of experience everything that came along with both of those. And then just over 3 years ago now, I transitioned to Oregon, where I am now, as a full-time director of athletics. It's what I get to do all day, every day, and that's where my passion is. So I'm super fortunate to have landed where I am.
And help me out here. Oregon High School is in Milwaukee.
Nope, just outside of Madison.
Just outside of Madison. Okay,
Yep.
So I'll show my ignorance of the geography of Wisconsin. How far is Madison from Milwaukee?
A little over an hour. So it's kind of straight west from Milwaukee.
Right. And Green Bay is what, from Milwaukee, an hour and a half, 2 hours north?
Straight north, pretty much. Yep.
And Whistling Straits, which I actually visited. We were on our way to see Lambeau Field. Didn't have enough time to get there, but I stopped at the golf course. That's got to be an hour or so.
Yep, over towards the lake there.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's talk for a minute about your younger days. Were you able to participate in any sports at all since you were the AD? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, as a kid, I got to kind of try everything. I have an older brother. He's 16 months older than me, and what he did, I wanted to do. So he was a hockey player, so I started playing hockey. He played some soccer, so I played soccer. And those are the two that really kind of stuck with me. I actually still compete in both to this day. I find adult leagues to kind of compete in and keep me active and staying busy. So that's something that I definitely still enjoy. But, I grew up in a household where kind of sports were a priority, and, find something that you like doing and then let's give it a try. My dad was a Phi Ed teacher, so that's kind of where I got that passion from, and kind of went that career path was kind of through his role modeling. And we got to go to school with him some days if we didn't have school and his district did. Back then we got to tag along and it wasn't really a big deal. Now it'd be a little bit more frowned upon, I'm thinking. But that was kind of the upbringing that I had, and it was a really good experience. And that kind of led me into coaching. Is I knew that I wanted to kind of give back to the game. So I started coaching high school hockey, actually my freshman year of college. I volunteered that very first year. And then year 2, I was a paid assistant and did that all the way up until I had my first kid. So just always trying to find something to keep busy with, keep competing, and trying to stay young.
I'm interested in your adult league that you play with the other players. What position are you playing?
Well, so actually for hockey, there's this amazing rink in the Madison area. It's a smaller rink. They call it the studio rink. So it's a 3-on-3 league. So
Oh,
there's only a center red line. So that's your offsides. There's no
okay, sure.
icing. You actually play the puck off everything. If it hits the ceiling or the walls, you just keep playing. There's only face-offs in the game are after goals. So if the puck, if the goalie freezes the puck, they just kind of release it to a teammate, the other team backs off, and then you go. But it is such a great workout. And, it's so fast paced, kind of back and forth. And we have a team of predominantly all women, and we get to play against all the guys. And it's just a really fun experience. We used to hold our own a little bit better than we do today, but we're still grinding.
Well, is that because I know you got to change lines, and I was never a great hockey player. I just played here and there when I could. And of course, we don't have the
Yeah.
leagues out here in Utah that you have. So you have a goalie, a backup goalie. Do you have like 9 people on the team? So you have 3 lines of players, or do you have 4 lines, or how does that work?
So we have, I think per the league rules, I think you can have up to 8 on your roster and then a goalie. We're all pretty much moms, so it's very rare that we're all there because we're running kids to other events and whatnot. So we say it's a good night if we have 7 of us, just to kind of, be able to catch your breath, because you're taking 45, 50-second shifts, catching a quick drink of water, and then you're right back out there. So it's so fun. We do it for the workout, we do it for the relationships with each other, and just kind of for something to look forward to, for us, since so much of what we do, as moms is in service of our kids, but even professionally, we serve others through our work roles too.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Let me
Yeah.
have you talk for a moment about some of the leaders and mentors you've had in your life, both at maybe high school, in college, and in WADA and the NIAAA.
Yeah, so I'd be lying, if I didn't mention my dad, who I talked about a little bit earlier. He was a high school football and hockey coach. He actually did not grow up playing the game of hockey, just kind of picked it up as we started getting into it. And all the way through high school for me, I did not play on a team that he wasn't coaching in some capacity. So even to this day, I'll hear myself say something when I'm coaching, and I'm like, oh, that was dad. But I'm super lucky I was able to get him to come back, and now he's coaching my kids too. So we've got Grandpa John out there on the ice, and I swear he's every kid's favorite coach, which is fine. He can have those accolades. But it's so much fun to be kind of coaching alongside him now. Professionally, I've had 2 amazing bosses as principals, both in New Glarus and in Oregon. The principal in Oregon, his name was Jeff Eichelkraut, and in New Glarus was Jeff Eichelkraut, and here in Oregon, it's Jim Pleiner. And they were both coaches. They both had been athletic directors, so they absolutely get the work, and they get the importance of high school athletics for not just the kids participating, but for the community as a whole. And so I've been super supported by both of those individuals in the stuff that I was trying to do with my teams and my athletes and my coaches. And anytime I had a question, they were just a knock away. Actually, Jim's office is literally the one next to mine. So sometimes we don't even get out of our chairs. We just kind of holler around the corner to one another questions.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so they've been really good sounding boards. And then, within WADA and the NIAAA, Greg Smith, who, he's our retired executive director.
Right.
He was an amazing leader. I only got to work with him through that role. I didn't work with him when he was an active AD, but he certainly was another sounding board for me. And if I ever had questions, he was somebody I could go to. The same is true of Jeff Sitz now, Greg Harvey. We've had really good leadership within WADA. And I'm starting to kind of know more and more people within the NIAAA, and I think the same is true there too. So I just feel fortunate.
Excellent. Let me ask you a little bit of a personal question here, BSG. What's your biggest what's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
So I've been thinking about this one, and I don't know that I'd necessarily call it a failure, but I do have a regret, a big regret. I talked about kind of my trajectory to college and attending UW-Madison. And I didn't pursue college hockey in any capacity. So I knew I wanted to go to UW, it was kind of where my parents both went. And UW women's hockey has a tradition of being a very strong program, and they certainly were back then too. That I never even attempted to join the hockey team at Madison or to even look elsewhere to play. So I regret that. Every once in a while I'll kind of wonder, what could have happened, what other experiences might I have had if I would have, attempted to pursue something. But I got into coaching and kind of went down that path. So like, I certainly don't regret the relationships I made through the pathway I did take. There's just kind of that, what if that's out there.
Let me ask you about being an AD, and let me ask you from your perspective, how different it is from when you first started, or by the same token, how much it's still the same since you started.
Yeah, so part of me wonders if some of the differences are based on school size. So I mentioned New Glarus was a school of about 300 students. Oregon's about 1,300. So with that comes some natural differences. But if I kind of drill down, I think one of the biggest differences that I've noticed is just kind of some of the expectations, not necessarily internal expectations, but from some external sources. You know, as the world outside of education-based athletics has expanded, I think parents are expecting more of our coaches and our teams and our programming than what we can sometimes offer. I think sometimes we don't meet those expectations, or, in my opinion, there's a lot of high level opportunities in the Madison area. So if a kid wants to go and play AAU basketball or club volleyball, like there's a place for kids to do that here. And then we sometimes hear, well, how come my kid didn't make X, Y, and Z? Because they're on the A team at their club. So just kind of some of those crossovers are leading to tricky conversations for some of my coaches. So we're working to support that as we can and kind of build those relationships with parents. And so that's definitely been kind of an evolution, I feel. I think the coaches are still as great now as they were when I started. I've just learned too the importance of providing them as many resources as I can. As a new AD, I didn't necessarily know what they needed. Whereas now I've learned a little bit along the way. So I might give something before they necessarily ask for it, hoping that it's a resource that would be used.
Excellent. Talk for a minute about being a successful woman AD. And I say that because even though we in the athletic director world are getting better and there's lots more women than there were 5, 10, 15 years ago, it's still male dominated, and depending on the state, some states much more than the other. So talk about that, and at the same time about, because obviously you're well respected in your organization because you're the president-elect of WADA. And so talk about both these things together.
Yeah, for me, growing up as a hockey player, it was a male dominated sport. So back then there weren't really girls teams. So if I wanted to play, I was playing co-ed alongside the boys. And I was lucky if there was kind of one other girl on the team alongside me. So I'm kind of used to being in the minority kind of when it comes to gender in the things that I'm doing. But I also had really supportive experiences along the way. So I never really planned on becoming an AD. So that's what's kind of unique is 3 years in at New Glarus, the former AD retired. And it was kind of like, okay, who's going to pick this up as this, small position within the greater school day? I had just had a baby, and they were like, well, Brittany, you're a FIAD teacher. Like, are you interested? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like this sounds fun. So started kind of doing the work and actually really enjoyed it. And so that's kind of what really led me to kind of want to learn and continue growing and getting more involved. You mentioned President-elect Awada. That was something that I didn't envision when I started doing this, 12 years ago. But I'm certainly super appreciative of the opportunities that have been presented to me through the organization and, just the ability to help give back. We're busy planning our annual conference right now. It's coming up in November. So those are things that I wouldn't have had a front row seat to had I not kind of taken the risk, for lack of a better phrase, of digging in and being willing to do the work.
Let me ask you how, when you first became the AD, how did you become aware of WADA? How did you hear about it? Did people reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? How did that work for someone that's new in Wisconsin?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. You're going to challenge my memory. So in Wisconsin, our state association actually hosts, they're called an area meeting, and they kind of travel to different areas of the state to host these meetings. And the expectation is that each member school sends a representative to one of the meetings throughout the state. So
Sure.
we actually have 7 districts. And so both of my schools have been in District 5 is what it's called. So that was an early September meeting, and got a sub for the day, went to the meeting and just sat there and listened and learned all about what was being discussed. What were the major topics of conversation, what were some potential constitutional changes coming down the pipeline. I mean, you name it. I sat there a month into the job essentially, and was just astounded listening to everybody around me and the things that they were talking about. So that's what kind of first turned me on to the association. And then somebody stood up from WADA and they gave some updates. We've got a conference coming up. You should get involved. We've got class opportunities. So then I kind of went back home and started researching what this WADA organization was. And then I quickly kind of signed up, went to the first conference and was hooked from there.
That's excellent. When you first started, then was Greg Smith, because I don't think when you first started you had an executive director yet.
He had
or had he just become that?
He had just become that. So I started in 2013 in Oregon, and I want to say he started in either 11 or 2012 as executive director, somewhere in there.
That sounds about right. And
Yeah.
so what else, obviously, talk to our audience about the path to become obviously president-elect of WADA. There had to be an election of some sort, or some of the other things you got involved in that led you to do this.
Yeah. So, aside from signing up for the conversation or for the convention in always in November here, we have through the state association, through the WIAA, we have what are called district reps and gender representatives. So there's an election every other year for who is going to become the district rep in each of those 7 districts. And then whatever gendered person wins that election, someone from the opposite gender then runs for this gender rep position. And when I took over, there were 3 women in our district. And the one woman approached me. She actually called me at school and she said, I need you to become the gender rep because I've done it for X number of years and I need a break. And I think it would be really good for you to get involved. And I was like, well, what's it going to require of me? And she said, well, you're going to go to the WI office 3 times a year. You get to cast votes on behalf of our district regarding like potential rules changes within each sport. But otherwise, it's not that big of a commitment. So I was like, all right, yeah, I can do that. So that was kind of my first in with the WA or WADA directly. So went to those meetings. And then after 4 years as a gender rep, my term was up. I couldn't run for reelection. So I said, okay, I'll throw my name in the hat then for district rep. Was able to win that election and served. It was two 2-year terms. But COVID was in there. So that kind of actually became like a 6-year term because we wanted to get back onto a schedule. So kind of did that, and then I knew my term was going to be up and I couldn't run again, and they were asking for nominations for vice president for people who are willing. So I threw my name in the ring for that. A little secret, it was uncontested at the time. So who knows? But I was able to assume the role of vice president all last year, and now this year have transitioned into the president-elect role. And I am closely paying attention to those in the shoes in front of me. Just kind of learning all the ins and outs of, what are the little things within the conference and within the organization that, from the outside you don't know about. And I'm just kind of taking diligent notes so that I hopefully don't screw things up once it's my turn.
And then you spend a year as the past president. So it's a 3-year commitment.
It's actually a 4-year. So a year as VP, a year as president-elect,
Okay.
a year as president, and then a
Right.
year as past. Yep.
Okay. And let's talk for a minute about your NIAAA involvement. I'm sure you've taken many of the classes, been to a national conference. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so I mean, my first in there was really the classes and, signing up at the WADA conference. That was kind of the first real opportunity. I didn't experience the national conference until, what was it, 2018, 2019, San Antonio. That was my first one. And ever since then, I haven't missed. But it was really kind of these classes that have really good information. I should keep taking them. So through that, I started down my pathway towards certification, worked on getting my CAA designation, and just continued doing stuff through WADA. And then, during COVID, I decided that's my time. I need to go for my CMAA, and I worked on my project. I did it on student recognition. And let me tell you, we all recognize our students. And when you actually sit down and think about the different things that you're doing, there's a CMAA project for anybody who is kind of listening, who hasn't already done one. It's not necessarily new stuff that you need to kind of create and produce. It's stuff you're already doing that you can just pull out and turn into a really awesome presentation. So that was something that I was able to do. Let's think. After that, I joined the NIAAA U leadership cohort that Daryl Nance started. That was an amazing experience. Our cohort still keeps in touch. We have a text thread that will kind of rattle off messages to one another. People from all throughout the country that we've just been able to stay connected and, hey, looking for a recommendation on, something. And, you got 3 responses within a minute of people who kind of have had the same questions and done the research. I'm currently serving as vice chair on the Coaches Ed committee. So kind of working through that committee and enjoying the experience there. And then actually this year I got to be a mentor with the Leadership U cohort. So we're getting close to the end of the year. We've got just a couple meetings left, but that's been a really rewarding experience to kind of be on the other side of that leadership cohort and just kind of listening to what everybody else is contributing and trying to share a little bit of wisdom here and there. But, I'm still in awe of some of the things that the other mentors are sharing and even some of the participants in the class. I mean, any of them could be teaching it. Let's be honest.
That's some great insight. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's have you talk for a minute, Brittany, about the most recent conference in Orlando. Obviously, there was COVID. Then there was Denver, where we still had the masks. Then there was Nashville, which was the biggest conference we've ever had. But the one in Orlando, even complete with the rain we had last year, was the second biggest. So just share your observations and thoughts about attending that conference.
For me, the Orlando conference was actually the first time I brought my kids along. So they're 11 and 8 now. So we actually extended kind of the trip and brought them down on the back end. So, the beginning of the week for me, it was business. It was going to all the different sessions and learning from leaders throughout the country and retaining as much of the information as I could to bring back home. I'd be sending text messages to our administrative team at school, like, hey, we should consider this. Don't let me forget to try this. And, just kind of little nuggets like that. Having the opportunity to take an LTI class in Orlando and to learn from the people who actually wrote the class. That's an experience that you only get really when you're at the actual conference. Just all the connections, being able to see the Leadership U cohort that I had been a part of, reconnecting with some of those people in person, being able to meet as a coaches ed committee and sit in the same room and, just kind of talk ideas with one another. And just, yeah, the learning, just so much learning and networking and, just get out of your hotel room and get around and just start talking to people.
What's the favorite part of your job, Brittany?
Oh, it's the competitions. It's watching the kids and the coaches doing what it is that they love. There's a lot of work that gets put in behind the scenes leading up to that performance. But that's the showcase. People from the community are coming to watch, and hopefully we're seeing kids at their best and coaches at their best when they're performing. As the work I do is in support of that.
That is great. Let's finish up with a couple of questions. The first one being, you've got 2 suggestions for a brand new AD, and they need to follow BSG's suggestions in order to become a success. What would your 2 suggestions be?
My first suggestion would be to ask the questions. Sometimes when we're new, we feel like if we ask a question, then we need to wait a while until we ask another one. No, just ask the questions. The people who have been through it, they get it. And personally, I'd rather you ask me 17 questions so that I can provide you the answers I want you to know, as opposed to you kind of going elsewhere and guessing, and possibly getting it wrong. And then we're having to do some corrective measures on the back end. So, my first piece of advice would be to ask all the questions. And if you're not sure on the response, ask another person, and just keep asking. And then my second kind of suggestion would be to find a way to get involved outside of your school. So maybe that's at the district level, maybe it's at the state level. It could be taking an LTI class. The NIAAA offers so many opportunities for LTI, from webinars to some of the classes that are always available online, to the conference, state level. So just kind of find something to get involved, attend your state conference. If you ever get the opportunity to go to the national conference, do it. Don't hesitate. Don't blink, just do it. And then, are there other committees that you can get involved in at the state level? That was really my first in. And without it, who knows where I'd be now.
Great suggestions. Thanks so much. We'll finish with this. BSG, what questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I've been thinking about this one, and I think your questions were pretty good. I think I got to kind of share quite a bit about me on my professional journey. I guess the last thing I'll kind of leave with is, I think professionally, my career changed when I had kids and when I became a mother. Because I think now I look at things a lot differently. As if this was my kid, how would I want this situation to be handled? I don't fear conversations with parents like I maybe once did. Nobody likes picking up the phone and calling and delivering bad news and things like that. But I realized the more we can have that conversation and build the relationship, I think the more we can support the students and the coaches, at competition time. So just kind of having those tough conversations and not shying away from them. My principal told me, don't let their problem become your problem. So by putting it off, it kind of becomes a bigger thing. So just kind of being willing to address it head on is definitely something I've learned, and there's still room for improvement. That's for sure.
That is well said. Thank you so much for that insight. With that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, today our special guest has been Brittany Spencer Grant, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and the Director of Athletics at Oregon High School in Wisconsin. BSG, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.